Have you ever been told you have food sensitivities? Maybe you took a blood test and were handed a long list of foods to avoid, but after months of restrictive eating, you still don't feel your best. There's a lesser known method that looks at food from a completely different lens. It doesn't rely on immune markers or symptom tracking, but on how your body constitutionally handles certain food. It's called the Carroll Food Intolerance Method, and it may hold the missing piece for many people with chronic health symptoms. This method is uniquely offered by licensed naturopathic doctors who received additional training in the Carroll technique, and it's not available through conventional labs or standard food testing. But first, let's clear something up that confuses a lot of people. When people say they react to foods, they're often lumping together three very different things: food allergy, food sensitivity, and food intolerance. What's important to clear up is the difference between a food allergy, a food sensitivity, and a food intolerance. They're not the same, and understanding the difference really matters when you're trying to get to the root of your chronic symptoms. Let's break them down. A true food allergy is an immediate immune reaction. Your body produces IgE antibodies in response to a specific food like peanuts, shellfish, or strawberries, and reacts right away when you eat it. This type of reaction can range from mild to severe and may include symptoms like hives, swelling of the face, lips, or throat, trouble breathing, vomiting, and in more serious cases, it can progress to anaphylaxis, which is a life-threatening whole-body allergic reaction that requires emergency care. These kinds of allergies are typically diagnosed with blood or skin tests that measure IgE antibodies, and people with true food allergies usually need to strictly avoid that food and carry emergency medication like an EpiPen. This is where things get more nuanced now. Food sensitivities usually involve IgG antibodies, which are another type of immune marker your body creates in response to things it sees as foreign. Unlike IgE, IgG reactions are delayed. They might show up several hours or even a couple days after you eat the food, which make them harder to connect with your symptoms. People often experience bloating, brain fog, joint pain, fatigue, skin rashes, or headache. Now, here's the tricky part. Just because your immune system makes IgG antibodies to a food doesn't always mean you're sensitive in a problematic way. Sometimes it just means you've been eating that food frequently, and IgG can be part of a normal, non-inflammatory immune response. But when the immune system gets triggered repeatedly, or when the gut barrier is damaged, those IgG responses can become excessive and create chronic low-grade inflammation. Now, what about leaky gut? Some of you might have heard of this before. If your gut lining is damaged, a condition known as leaky gut or intestinal permeability, then undigested food particles can slip through that barrier and enter the bloodstream. And when that happens, your immune system then sees these food proteins as intruders because they're not supposed to be there passing through into the blood, and then starts making IgG antibodies against them. This means you might test positive for sensitivity to dozens of food, but it's not because all of those foods are a problem. It may be because your gut barrier is compromised and letting those larger food particles pass into blood circulation. So typically our gut lining is one cell layer thick, and they're tightly held together through something called tight junctions. And when those tight junctions get damaged from toxins, stress, eating your food intolerances, which we'll talk about later, then those tight junctions can get compromised, and now they separate and they're not so tight anymore, and we have this leaky gut situation. So then these larger food particles, as we mentioned, that should stay in the middle of the gut or only allow very digested smaller food particles or hydration and water pass through. Now these bigger food particles can pass through this compromised gut, go into the bloodstream, tag those IgG antibodies, and cause problems for you. The immune system then flags those food particles as a threat and starts producing more antibodies. So sometimes, again, the real issue isn't food then, it's the gut barrier that needs healing. And the thing is, most people with chronic symptoms already have some degree of leaky gut, whether from stress, antibiotics, food additives, gut infections, or inflammation. So their IgG food panels may be misleading. This is one reason why so many people get overwhelmed with long food avoid lists but don't actually feel better. So you might get a result with 20 or 30 different foods that you're reacting to, and then you might cut them all out, but then maybe some things clear up, but then other things are still persisting. And then you go back and retest that panel, and now you're reacting supposedly to a whole new long list of problems. And this is because we haven't identified the core culprit here. And this brings us to food intolerances. A food intolerance is different. It's not immune related. It's about a digestive mismatch. So your body lacked the ability to properly break down or metabolize certain foods. A classic example is lactose intolerance. If you don't make enough lactase enzyme, you can't break down lactose in dairy, and you end up with gas, bloating, cramping, or other symptoms. The Carroll Food Intolerance Method falls into this category, but it goes even deeper. It identifies your constitutional intolerances present from birth to certain foods or food combinations that your body simply can't process process efficiently, often due to an inherited enzymatic deficiency. Rather than showing up as immediate symptoms, this type of intolerance creates chronic inflammation or congestion in the body that can lead to issues with your skin, sinuses, energy, mood, digestion, including contributing or worsening leak gut, and a lot more. So what is the Carroll Food Intolerance Method? The Carroll method was developed in the early 1900s by Dr. Otis Carroll, who was a naturopathic physician. And what he discovered with his patients was that there was a constitutional inability to digest or metabolize certain foods or food combinations, even if those foods are considered healthy. So these are the foods that are healthy, but just not healthy for you because you can't break them down and digest them properly. So it's not about immune reactions or symptoms in the moment. It's about a long-standing mismatch between your body and a certain food group, one that can cause low-level inflammation or dysfunction over time. This method identifies your primary food intolerances, some of the main ones being fruit, potato, dairy, egg, sugar, fish, meat, and mined salt, and your combination intolerance, which are two food groups that can be eaten separately but should be avoided in combination together. And usually they need to be separated from each other by at least 4 to 8 hours. So some of these combination intolerance examples are fruit with sugar or grain with potato. So again, you can eat those foods separately, like you can eat fruit separately and sugar separately, but they need to be separated from each other by a number of hours and should not be in the same food product together. And here's a fun fact. What we've seen is that for many people who have gluten sensitivity, it's not always the gluten that they actually have an issue with. It's that their combination intolerance includes grains or gluten and some other food, usually potato, dairy, or sugar in combination, which is what they really have trouble with when they experience symptoms. So when they avoid this combination, they may have and find that they have less of a problem with grains and gluten. The other issue important to highlight here could be that this could also be a reaction to glyphosate that's sprayed on many foods. So sometimes it's not a true gluten problem, but there's some other factors going on that's important to look at. Unlike other food sensitivity tests, one's Carroll intolerance results are lifelong and constitutional. So not something that fluctuates over time or changes. So what happens in your body when you eat a food that you're intolerant to? Unlike an allergy or sensitivity that might cause an immediate or immune reaction, a food intolerance, like the one identified through the Carroll method, causes problems because your body can't properly digest or break down. And here's what I usually explain to my client. Every time you eat that food that you're intolerant to, your digestive system lacks the enzymatic ability, lacks the enzymes to fully break it down properly. So instead of it getting properly digested and used as fuel and nutrition, it just sits in the GI tract. And during the 1 to 3 days it takes to move through your system, that food starts to ferment, rot, or putrefy, depending on the food and your gut environment. This breakdown process doesn't just cause gas and bloating, it creates toxic byproduct in the gut because, again, it's not being properly broken down, so it's just sitting there. Your body then tries to compensate by calling in more bacteria to help process that undigested food, and over time this can lead to bacterial overgrowth, whether in the small intestine, which is called SIBO, large intestine, or more widespread gut dysbiosis. Then the toxins created during that putrefaction process cross the gut lining into the bloodstream, especially if your gut barrier is already compromised. Now that toxin-laden blood is circulating throughout your entire body, and it tends to affect the areas and systems that are already more vulnerable for you personally. So for one person, that might be the reproductive system, which can show up as irregular cycles, hormonal imbalance, or fertility challenges. For another, it might be the nervous system. So they might experience brain fog, headaches, anxiety, or poor focus. Others might notice it in their joints, skin, or even their lungs or immune system. So when people ask, well, what does what I eat have to do with my migraines, my fertility, or my joint pain? The answer is everything you eat becomes part of the internal chemistry your body is working with. So food is either supporting your system or creating an extra burden in a real physiological sense. This is why identifying and removing your core food intolerances can be such a powerful chain, because it stops that daily cycle of fermentation, toxin production, and systemic stress. Let's briefly touch on accuracy. The Carroll method, while not yet studied in mainstream research, identifies those core digest mismatches that can quietly undermine your health across multiple systems. It also doesn't fluctuate with time, illness, or recent food exposure, making it more stable and reliable. And you'll hear over and over from those of us who evaluate Carroll intolerances that it is our preferred method of identifying true intolerances because we've seen the incredible results again and again with our patients in practice. Now, again, most food sensitivity tests today measure immune reactivity, particularly IgG antibodies to specific food, but there are some important limitations. So again, IgG often reflects food exposure, not always true sensitivity, though sometimes it can. So if you eat a lot of eggs, for example, your IgG to eggs might be high, even if you're not actually reacting to them problematically. These tests can vary from lab to lab and often change based on gut health, stress, infections, or what you've eaten recently. Many people get overwhelmed with long avoid lists, only find that cutting out those foods doesn't actually resolve their symptoms. In contrast, the Carroll method identifies your clear intolerances, and many people experience profound shifts in their digestion, skin, energy, and mental clarity when they remove those core triggers, along with clearing up whatever chronic health problems that they may have been experiencing for a lot of their life, and they couldn't attribute a core cause as to why all this was going on. Here's a little analogy. Imagine your GI tract is like a car engine, okay? So if you pour in a fuel your engine wasn't designed to burn, it won't shut down immediately, but over time, you notice performance starts to struggle. Your check engine light goes on in the form of chronic health symptoms. The Carroll method helps you identify your engine's mismatch so you can run clean again. After eliminating their Carroll food intolerances, people often report more consistent energy, better bowel movements, reduced bloating or skin issues, clearer mental focus, and improved immune resilience. And this is all without the guesswork or endless food eliminations, which can be helpful. But for those of you who've tried it, it can be very time consuming, or those unnecessary restrictions. So what actually changes when someone removes their Carroll food intolerances? In my practice, I've seen this one shift make an incredible impact across a wide range of symptoms, even in areas that might not seem food related at first. So here are just a few things that have improved after removing a person's Carroll intolerances. Chronic digestive issues like bloating, constipation, or reflux, especially GERD, have cleared up. Skin problems like eczema, acne, or general inflammation. Joint pain and stiffness improves. Brain fog, memory issues, and mental fatigue. Migraines or recurring headaches resolve. And even fertility challenges. I've had women who've struggled with primary or secondary infertility go on to conceive naturally after identifying and eliminating their Carroll intolerances. Now, it's not the only piece of the puzzle, of course, but for many, it's a foundational one for optimal physical health. That said, this is most effective when done within the context of a full naturopathic care plan. Because while food intolerances can create chronic stress on the system, so can a poor quality or highly processed diet. In addition to that, environmental toxins, stress and poor sleep, overloaded elimination pathways like in the liver, kidneys, skin, and bowels. And if those are sluggish or overwhelmed, even a perfect diet won't restore balance on its own. So while removing your intolerance can remove a big obstacle to healing, it works best when paired with an overall lifestyle that supports vitality, clean diet, quality sleep, mindful movement, stress reduction, and support for your body's natural detox and repair system. And if you've been on the channel for a bit, you know my view about taking a holistic approach as well. So the importance of addressing also the mental, emotional, and spiritual elements along with physical components. When all of those pieces come together, people often say, I didn't realize how bad I was feeling until I started feeling better. If you've tried elimination diets, IgG panels, or gut repair protocols, but still feel like something's missing, it may be time to take a different approach. While the Carroll food intolerance method isn't mainstream, it's utilized by those of us who practice traditional naturopathy. And for many of our patients, it's that key missing puzzle piece. If you want to learn more or find a naturopathic practitioner trained in the Carroll method, I'll link some resources for you below. And if you've ever done food testing, what worked and what didn't? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.